The bounty hunters. Ms. Herika Spindle is a strict professional. You have to be when your job involves the well-being of children. Anything less than perfection means some poor, innocent soul is damned. She has been trained and taught to make the hard choices to ensure that the young and the raw, untamed potential they have within themselves is nurtured to the best of LeBlanc's capacity. The job is not glamorous, and many have accused her of destroying families or being a heartless monster. But the truth is that she cares a great deal, and if she were to grow attached to the many children she helps, then her own heart would break. Everyone wants a child at some level, but not everyone is fitting to be a parent. No amount of love can fill an empty stomach. No amount of friendship can magically conjure clothing, a stable home, or a proper education. Her job made her the villainess in far too many scenarios, and she was not pleased about this current one. She's not pleased because she was called in by a noble woman with concerns about someone else's child. These kinds of cases always went one of two ways, and neither way was pleasant. She was either being used as a pawn in a political game against the noble's enemies, or she was being directed to a blatant and hideous case of child abuse that has not been stopped for some goddess-forsaken reason. She's either going to be dancing on strings or walking into hell, and she hates either scenario. She's the spider. The only strings on or around her should be of her own spinning. She shakes her head and pushes a green strand of hair out of her eyes. No amount of moaning or mentally debating will help beforehand. She needs a proper grasp of the situation before she makes any judgments. For all she knows, the image she was shown of the injured child was in fact a young man with a vivid and large birthmark. Far from a problem, and not even that unusual, her own carapace has a distinctive splotch that looks like a massive scar in the correct light. More than one drunken friend had to be told that Herika had in fact not been impaled by something twice the size of her head, which is the second reason she tends to wear a silken blanket over her lower body. The first is that some people have an irrational fear of spider, and as a weaver archney, most people mistake her for a tret sitting upon a massive spider at first glance. Funnily enough, it's only after that they tend to notice her pale purple complexion or 8 shimmering ruby eyes, which is just not something that occurs in trets. Still, people, especially children, can be quite silly. So blanket over the spider part of her just in case the little ones think that having 8 legs to stand on and 2 for show is too many. Excuse me, but according to my communicator, we have just arrived in the Mordonan system. We seem to be rather ahead of schedule. She notes, pressing on the push to talk feature on her little travel apartment. We are. There's been a recent update to our engines and we haven't adjusted the schedules yet. So far, there's been no complaints so long as we keep our departure dates the same. No one really minds arriving early. The captain of the public transport states, and she nods. Of course. Thank you very much for explaining, she says and lets the button go. Time to review the case. Just the overall details, as the finer details are almost always wrong, or understated, or overstated, or even just made up wholesale. It had been given without a fight from the undaunted who had the whole story. A great deal of it was redacted for security or other such reasons, but it was a hell of a read. There is a Nagasha child, 16 years of age. Slithern Schmidt, formerly known as Slithern Hardytail. He was born to Salamistra Hardytail, a jungle Nagasha with a few prior convictions, but nothing more serious than vandalism, and Zaz Hardytail, a Great Plains Nagasha that Slithern clearly took the majority of his features from. The boy did have a slightly longer and stronger tail than average for a Great Plains Nagasha, but his jungle Nagasha mother easily accounted for it. Up until about a year ago, the only thing that would even ding the boy's life story is the fact his mother was barred from government work in her home system and had taken up a job with a small transport fleet before meeting her husband and marrying into a family. She was not the favored wife, but clearly had been happy enough and was more or less one of the loading crew and on occasion maintenance. And while Salamistra was mildly interesting, Zaz was only interesting due to being male. He was a house husband through and through, introduced to his future head wife by his sisters, and looked like he had never so much as considered doing something other than living the best life he could as father and husband. An average family with an average job in an average part of the galaxy. Nothing to be concerned about there. Then the report of the fleet's destruction. The fine details are lost, but it's all tied to a single brutal ship. Harika had done a bit of research on the chaining, and she had found a reputation so dense with madness and cruelty that a black hole wouldn't be able to wipe it clean. It had hit his home fleet on the way to attacking another prize. He was the only listed survivor of a family several hundred strong. That alone was enough to break someone. But spending weeks on the chaining, with its cannibal reputation? Forget getting out without trauma. How does one escape that alive? Then the story abruptly shifts. The crew of the chaining is reported as killed, and the surviving slaves are all freed and take the ship to the humans before they were undaunted. The ship is rechristened the Chainbreaker, and the leader of the slave rebellion, alongside another former slave, adopts the boy and keeps him on the renamed ship. That was a fucking warning sign. Why would they keep the child on the same terrible ship that had shattered everything he knew and loved, and it would be enough to bring her in with an army of psychologists in tow by itself? Not only for the child who's undergone that sheer amount of trauma, but the clearly traumatized adults who are just not thinking clearly. But then the story gets even odder. The ship travels from place to place, hunting criminals all over, and there are numerous notes that the child has received many different counseling sessions with different psychologists from the Dauntless. The boy has received an enormous amount of professional help, and even now is talking to a doctor twice weekly. When things began, he had several hours each day dedicated to helping him every day. Then sometime several months ago, the amount of sessions were toned back until they reached their current state. Then, a lot of nothing. The details are sparse. There are notes on some legal upgrades to his prosthetics, and he is given a few upgrades around the time that a second mother in the form of a high-ranking priestess of the synthetic ascension. They get sparser still, but the note of him getting a drone operator's license and a pilot's license. Then it leads to an incident on Lobe to Lobe that's completely redacted and only a nod of him assisting somewhat. Then it leads to this incident now, where he was getting full credit for taking down a gigantic monster created by and merged with a Trini Gestalt. And the boy was still covered in the scars of his abuse from the monsters on the chaining. There was a lot to be concerned about, but there was still so much unknown. So much she has to see. We're coming up on the cordon around Mordon 2. We will be docking with the Shield of Steadfast Devotion. Everyone with official imperial business will be departing there, the captain says, and Harika nods to herself. She pockets her communicator and gathers up her things. She then quickly cleans up the small apartment, mostly gathering up the wrappers of her snacks and treats before tossing them all in the garbage. She rolls her neck a bit, and then there's a slight jump of the ship as it lands. It takes a few minutes before her apartment is signaled as the one to empty out now. You need things like this, otherwise small transport ships like this would easily end up with great big traffic jams. She scuttles out with ease and quickly finds herself in a landing bay. She shifts her things a little and finds a pair of guards holding a projector that's keeping her name up in the air. "Miss Spindle, I presume?" the soldier asks her, and she nods. They briefly bow to each other, and the soldier starts leading her through the ship. "Very good. You actually have excellent timing. The captain of the Chainbreaker is sparring with Divine Leader Thread." "Really? That would be Captain Schmidt, yes? The adoptive father of Slither Schmidt?" "Yes, also he has a hilarious nickname that makes what he's doing extra funny." "A nickname?" "Yes, it means to vomit in his original language, but it's pronounced pukey," the guard says, and Harika pauses and then scrunches all 8 of her eyes together. "And he's sparring with a Divine Leader?" "Yes, second Divine Leader Thread. A man who is regularly called Pukey is having a fight with a fully accredited Divine Leader for fun?" "Yes," the widely smiling Drin says. "Language is quite the beast to wrestle, isn't it?" Harika asks. "It is." "Why does he let people call him something that references vomit?" Harika asks, and the soldier shrugs. "I don't know. I'm sure there's a story. Apparently they're not even official call signs. Only one of them has an official call sign, and that one is their main pilot." "And what kind of nickname is it?" "Air farce." "Air farce, was that translated?" "It was." "Air joke, what?" "A pilot so good he pulls of insane stunts that people would end up crashing and burning to even try," the soldier says. During the wait for your arrival, Airfarce decided to have some fun with a shuttle, and just watching the man go nearly made my heart stop. I didn't know that a shuttle could flip around like that, let alone that it could be timed to dodge obstacles the way he did. Really? Yes, and here we are, the soldier says as she leads into a room to the immediate right that has seating surrounding a holochamber, within which shows an eartheny woman and a cyborg human fighting hard. Thread is trying and failing to get past Puki's cybernetic arm as he moves very, very fast to keep those diamond-plated claws away from him as he slowly waits for the opportunity to yank her out of position. She flares out her wings to try and get some distance, but he steps wide and slams his organic fist into her stomach with enough force that Thread skids back through the air before her wings flare out harder, and she brings foot claws down, followed by the main ones. He dodges back away from the foot claws and then deflects the hand claws before he's forced to dip his head to the side to avoid her proboscis. There is a moment it hangs in the air, and his organic hand comes up to grab it even as he's holding back her main claws before suddenly jumping as her upper body weapons are all tangled up together and kicks her in the side of the head and lays her out on the ground. 3-1 my favor, or do you want to try for best out of 7? Puki asks Thread as she pulls herself up. She looks right towards Herika, who then finds herself looking both Divine Leader Thread and Captain Gregory Schmidt from the opposite side of the room. They then turn back to each other. No, I think I've had enough. A skilled and strong opponent is one thing. One that gets more, so the more you fight is far, far worse. They may call you Puki, but it's clearly purest irony. You could consider me what little Puki from the stories wanted to be. And wouldn't that be an interesting revision to the tales? Thread remarks as she leads the way out. You're vicious in a fight. You don't just grab a girl's proboscis. I had to do something. You've got razor-sharp diamond blades at the end of every limb and a damn spear behind your lips. The only thing that kept Urthani from being galactic conquerors was the timid personality. And thanks to Emmanuel, that's gone now. If you girls don't get relabeled as Apex in the near future, I'll be shocked. Well, I suppose we'll be in good company then. There are few Apex races that aren't well regarded. Divine Leader to Thread notes as they both exit the holochamber to the cheers of the crew. Indeed, now unless I miss my assumption, I have a meeting with the Archna woman up there. Weaver Archna, please Captain Schmidt. The distinction is there for a reason. But for myself, I am Herika Spindle. A pleasure. Hopefully we can clear up any misunderstandings now that you're here. He says, holding out his hand, and she takes it and offers him a shake, as is the human custom. She says nothing about the fact that the mere presence of him makes her want it